What's going on, world? It's your boy Gemini Brown here, back with another episode of Nalo Kicking Knowledge. Today, we'll be continuing our Pluto through Houses series and taking a look at Pluto in the 7th. So, let's get into it. What's Pluto? Pluto is the soul. It's the psyche of the soul. It is the desires that emanate from the soul and the situations in which the soul is placed that triggers its evolution and transformation. The 7th house is our house of partnership. That entails romantic, friendship, business, all of that. And to some extent, it is a house of like business. It's the house of, legal standing and things like that. And you can overall just look at it as like a mirror. What others mirror back towards us, okay? And the overall just climate of our partnerships. So when Pluto comes into the 7th house, this is the original house of Libra. It's a cardinal sign. So more times than not, it's indicating a soul who is embarking on a new path involving relationships, okay? Here to initiate different types of partnerships. So the whole chart is really going to matter here because we all have our own individual karma and how we relate to relationships. So that's really going to dictate how things play out, okay? But at the core of it, the individual with this placement is here to achieve balance between themselves and others, to learn how to exist within a partnership, experience the balance and the quality that comes from that, and still maintain a sense of self, okay? So that right there is key. But one of the ways in which it plays out when you're learning, to develop, you can have some people who in a very early part of their lives, okay, especially like if they have a prominent Venus, like a Venus in Pisces, a Venus in Capricorn, a Venus in the 5th house, okay, 4th house, where it reinforces the need for partnership. Early on in life, you're going to have people who are very relationship oriented, and they are literally seeking their actual identity through that of partnerships, okay? They don't necessarily feel balanced, whole, or complete without that. So, I'm a teacher, so it's like I teach middle school, and this is like 11, 12, and some kids are just very much so engaged with others and this, they're dating and stuff like that, and you'll just see some have a upper hand, or a real more desire for something deeper than what it entails for that age. So normally this can be like someone with, like I said, a Pluto in the 7th with a prominent Venus. So early on in life, what happens is that they're way too intense when it comes to partnerships. They literally think every single person that they meet, particularly the first person they really fall in love with, is, the end all and be all. So these people have a tendency early on in life to plan their lives around that one person, okay? Or just believe that, this person is it. And they have an idea of what they want from partnership, and they're just waiting to like attract that. So to some extent with the person, like I said, who has that prominent, Pluto and Venus, can see them getting married really early on in life, okay? And then what that leads to overall is a suppression of the identity, because the relationship becomes such a focus early on. They never really take time to develop themselves, and then that leads to problems within the relationship. So let's just say we're given an example. We have someone with like an 8th house Pluto, or like an 8th house Venus, or a Venus in Scorpio, which we all know is just very, very intense. What happens is, over time, once the need has been met, the person can literally drive their partner away because their partner's like, okay, I feel a little smothered here, or like, all this love is cool, but you know, it's too much. They start to lose their identity or feel like they don't have room to develop. Okay, so that brings me to my next point. For people with Pluto in the 7th house, your relationships you're going to attract people in which you can learn from. The energy in which you are not embodying, they're more likely to embody that. Okay, so say you're super devoted. Okay, you may attract someone who is the opposite of that, who's really somewhat like just carefree and needs space. And then what does that do? It forces you to come to balance. You need to adjust to each other's love styles. But more times than not, if this is like the first significant relationship, it normally ends in a breakup. Okay, so in this one example I'm giving, these people who are very relationship oriented early on in life normally get their heart broken. They normally suffer a breakup in which they didn't necessarily see it coming. They thought they were doing everything to fulfill the person's needs, but to some extent that was kind of the problem. So remember, Pluto is all about evolution and forced change. So when you go too much to one extreme, Pluto reacts by saying, okay, I need to tear this down. I need to evolve you in some other way. And that normally comes in the form of heartbreak. Okay? So that's one example of one type of Pluto in the 7th house. Okay? Then you have the person who is very avoidant of this initial karmic goal of establishing partnerships. Okay? And this is normally like people with other planets in like prominent positions. So maybe like some like a Aries, some Aries planets, 1st house, 10th house, where their focus is not necessarily on romance or, you know, marriage or anything, but the actual using others to fulfill or build upon that personality or their self. Okay? And what happens is these type of people feel bogged down by relationships, or they ultimately end up avoiding them because they feel like the relationship will halt their progress in terms of who they're trying to become. Then you just have, you know, some who desire it. They know they desire it, but they're actually afraid of intimacy. So it can be a very, you know, complicated position. But normally what happens here is that the person attracts someone who's just like, doesn't go anywhere. The person who's just like, you need me and I know we're meant to be together. I'll wait for you. Or, you know, ultimately they allow the person to become who they become. They go through a lot of ups and downs, but eventually they come together. Okay? So, yeah, this position works in a really, really interesting kind of way. But one thing that is, you know, definitely imperative is that as the individual gets older, they learn more balance. Okay? Regardless of which end of the spectrum they were on, whether it be avoidant or, you know, overly relationship oriented, once they hit those 30s, 35, going into 40, they understand like, okay, this is what I need to do to improve, you know, my relationships. Okay? Now, I want to get into talking about signs, because the signs here are definitely going to alter this as well. So, obviously, people who are Pluto and Libra, what I've seen is that more times than not, these are people who really find their partners early on. Okay? And that's the thing about this position. Depending on how the rest of the chart plays out, Okay, if you have other stabilizing influences like planets in the fourth, you know, Venus and Saturn and, you know, contact, you're not necessarily meant to engage in a whole lot of relationships. Things will be solidified. You're here to really work on, you know, the commitment side and the structuring side of being within a partnership. Okay, then it's like, then when we go to like Pluto and Scorpio, this is where we're really working out a whole lot of psychological shit, childhood traumas. You know, if you got that 4th, 10th house, you know, action going on, like I just mentioned, you could be attracting people who mirror characteristics of your parents, okay, and trauma that you didn't, you know, address with that. So sign matters. Sign definitely matters here. And ultimately, whether or not you deal with things internally, they're going to be mirrored back to you within your partnerships. Okay, and you can't avoid that, because if you're like, okay, this person is too intense, or they're bringing up too much of this stuff, I want to find somebody who's lighter. You might find who appears lighter, but eventually, as the relationship flows on, they're gonna mirror that same thing. They're gonna bring it back up. So this is really good for learning how to make your relationships better. And I believe when you know you have Pluto in the 7th, this is like a stepping stone for later incarnations, because your partnerships with others are really going to, how you deal with them now and the karma you create or you know, balance here is going to play a major part in the future. So that's good to keep in mind. But like I said, find the balance. How can my relationships make me better? What am I avoiding within relationships? Okay, and ultimately, where is the balance? All right. It's a little bit about Pluto in the 7th. I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free, chime in, let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, you can do so now. If you need a reading, holla at me. Till next time, peace.